I still remember the exact moment it happened. The way my phone lit up, buzzing on the coffee table, as if it carried nothing more than another ordinary message. But it wasn't ordinary. It was the sentence that cracked my chest open and reminded me just how unwanted I was in my own bloodline. You're not invited. Your brother doesn't want you there. 7 words. 7 sharp little daggers that sliced deeper than anything I'd ever felt. And the cruelest part, I had paid for it all. I should start from the beginning, shouldn't I? So you understand why those words cut me the way they did. I am the eldest daughter in my family. The one who was always expected to be strong, to step aside, to sacrifice. You know the type, the girl who grows up being told her brother is the crown jewel, the one worth investing in, while she is simply there. My brother Daniel was the golden child. From the time we were little, everything revolved around him. His soccer games, his science projects, his birthdays with mountains of gifts, while I got sweaters to sizes too small. Our parents beamed whenever his name was spoken, while mine was usually followed by a sigh. I learned early, if I wanted love, I'd have to earn it. So I worked. I studied. I got a job at 16, not because I wanted pocket money, but because our family needed help. The bills, the groceries, the sudden emergencies, they all seemed to fall on my shoulders, and yet, whenever Daniel needed something, the world bent to his will. His car, paid for. His college, covered. His every mistake, excused. Do you know who paid for most of those things? Me. I didn't complain. Not at first. I told myself it was family. That's what we do, we lift each other up. I thought maybe one day they would see me, thank me, even love me a little more for all the things I quietly did. But no, the truth was, they grew to expect it. My sacrifices became invisible, like air they breathed without thought. When Daniel announced he was getting married, I was the first to celebrate. I clapped, I hugged him. I even offered to help with the planning. His fiancée, Lila, was sweet enough, pretty, polite, but distant, like she never really knew what to say to me. Still, I wanted to believe that maybe this was my chance. Maybe if I helped, if I gave, if I supported this wedding, I'd finally feel included. So I offered more than help. I offered money. It started small, covering the engagement party, because things were tight for our parents. Then the catering deposit. Then the flowers. Then the venue, which they swore they'd pay me back for but never did. Before long, every receipt, every bill, had my name on it. Tens of thousands of dollars. I told myself it was worth it. That when the big day came, I'd stand in the crowd, watching my brother walk down the aisle, and I'd finally feel like part of the family. But that text, "You're not invited. Your brother doesn't want you there," it was sent by my mother. Of all people. No hesitation. No apology. Just cold, clinical rejection. I sat there, staring at the screen, my hands shaking so hard I nearly dropped the phone. I read it over and over again, hoping maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe it was a cruel joke. Maybe they meant something else. But no, I wasn't wanted. After paying for it all, after years of being the safety net, I was nothing but an inconvenience to be erased from the perfect picture they were painting for Daniel's wedding. I remember laughing. A hollow, broken laugh that sounded more like a cough. It was absurd, wasn't it? To spend so much, to give so much, and be discarded like a used napkin. I pressed the phone to my chest and closed my eyes. For a moment, I let the pain wash over me. All the birthdays forgotten, the times I was left behind, the inheritance that skipped me entirely to land in Daniel's lap. It all piled up until my ribs ached with the weight of it, and then something inside me shifted. A thought, a whisper, a spark. They think they can erase me. No, not this time. I didn't reply to the text. Instead, I set my phone down, stood up, and walked to the mirror. I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. She wasn't the meek little girl begging for scraps of affection. She wasn't the sister who quietly signed checks and hoped for scraps of gratitude. No, she was someone who had just been set free. Because if I wasn't invited, if I wasn't wanted, if I wasn't part of their picture-perfect world, then I had nothing left to lose. And when you have nothing left to lose, that's when you become the most dangerous. The days that followed were strange. At first, I stayed quiet, letting them believe I had accepted their decision. My mother didn't check in, of course. Neither did my father. My brother never even messaged me himself. It was like I had already been erased, as if I didn't exist. But behind the silence, I was planning. Because here's the thing about paying for everything. Your name ends up on every contract. The venue, the catering, the flowers, the band, the photography, even the honeymoon suite. All of it was in my name. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized they had built this entire fantasy wedding on the foundation of my money, my effort, my trust. Without me, there was nothing. I didn't strike immediately. No, I waited. I let the days stretch closer and closer to the wedding, watched their social media posts flaunting the upcoming event, read the smug little captions about family love and dream come true. Family love, what a joke. And yet, I didn't want to ruin the wedding just for the sake of it. That wasn't enough. I wanted them to feel the emptiness I had felt. I wanted them to understand what it meant to be unwanted, discarded, erased. So I crafted a plan, one so quiet, so precise, they wouldn't see it coming until it was too late. And as I laid out every step, every domino that would fall, I realized something that made me smile for the first time in weeks. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the storm. But let me stop here for now, because before I tell you how I turned their dream wedding into a nightmare, you need to truly understand the history that led to this moment. You need to know why my revenge wasn't just about a wedding. It was about years of betrayal, of being invisible, of being used. So let's rewind. Let's go back to the beginning, back to when I first realized that in my family, love was conditional, and I was always the condition they never wanted to meet. When I was little, I used to believe that love was something you could earn. If I was good enough, if I worked hard enough, if I stayed quiet enough, maybe then my parents would see me. Maybe then they'd love me the way they loved my brother. But childhood has a cruel way of teaching lessons we don't want to learn. One of my earliest memories is of a birthday. Not Daniel's, mine. I must have been around 8. My friends from school had gathered in the backyard, little paper hats on their heads, balloons tied to the fence. My mother had baked a cake. But not for me. It was Daniel's favorite flavor, chocolate with caramel swirls. Mine was strawberry, but I never said anything. I remember blowing out the candles, but even then, the attention wasn't on me. My parents kept telling me to share the spotlight, to let Daniel cut the cake with me because he's your brother, and it's good to include him. By the time the party ended, I felt like a guest at my own celebration. That was the first time I noticed the pattern. Every milestone, every moment that should have been mine, was shared, diluted, or handed to Daniel. When I got an A on a math test, my father said, "That's good, but Daniel's science project might win the fair. We should focus on that." When I joined the school choir, my mother smiled politely but then asked, "Do you think you could help your brother with his soccer schedule instead?" It was always about him. By the time we were teenagers, the contrast was glaring. Daniel could get away with anything, miss curfew, fail classes, even crash the family car once, and he was still the golden boy. "He's just young," they'd say. "He'll learn." But me, I had to be perfect. If I came home 5 minutes late, there was a lecture. If I brought home a B instead of an A, I was told I wasn't applying myself. If I forgot one chore, it turned into proof that I was lazy, ungrateful, or a disappointment. It was as if my brother was a son they worshipped, and I was nothing but a shadow at his feet. I learned to stop expecting fairness. I learned to swallow my anger and turn it into fuel. And I told myself, someday they'll see. Someday they'll regret overlooking me. The years passed, and I became the reliable one, the dependable daughter, the one who handled the messy parts of life that no one else wanted to deal with. When our parents' mortgage payments fell behind, who picked up extra shifts at her part-time job? Me. When Daniel needed books for college and my parents couldn't cover it, who quietly wired him the money? Me. When the family car broke down, who paid for the repairs so everyone could keep driving it? Me. I was like a silent foundation holding everything up, but no one ever looked down to notice. Daniel, meanwhile, lived as if the world owed him everything. And in a way, it did. My parents adored him, shielded him, praised him. Even when he made reckless choices, there was always someone, usually me, cleaning up the mess behind him. It hurt, yes. But I told myself I was doing it for the family. That maybe, if I kept giving, they would finally see my worth. But deep down, I knew better. There was one moment that etched itself into me like a scar. I was 22, fresh out of college, and I had just landed a job at a mid-sized marketing firm. It wasn't glamorous, but it was my first real step into independence. That same week, Daniel flunked out of his university program. My parents were devastated, devastated for him. That night at dinner, I announced my new job, expecting maybe a smile, a congratulation of approval. Instead, my father put down his fork and sighed. "That's good, sweetheart," he said. "But we need to focus on your brother right now. He's really struggling." And just like that, my news was dismissed, overshadowed by Daniel's failure. I sat there, staring at my plate, realizing that no matter what I achieved, I would never be enough. Because in their eyes, Daniel's failures were more important than my successes. That was the night I stopped trying to win their love. I moved out not long after. My parents said I was abandoning the family. Daniel accused me of being selfish, even though I still helped financially from afar. But I knew if I stayed, I'd drown in their expectations and disappointments. I built a life on my own. I climbed the corporate ladder, worked late nights, saved aggressively. I learned how to rely on myself because no one else ever would, and slowly, I grew strong. But even from a distance, they still found ways to take a loan here, a favor there. Always framed as family helping family, but rarely repaid, never acknowledged. And each time, I gave in. Not because I expected gratitude, but because I didn't want to be the villain. Until the wedding, when Daniel announced his engagement, I should have seen the warning signs. My parents were ecstatic, treating it like a royal coronation. Every conversation revolved around dresses, flowers, venues, guest lists. I offered to help, thinking maybe just maybe, this would be the time I was included. The time I wasn't. Just the silent wallet in the background. At first, it felt good. I was part of the planning, making decisions, writing checks. Layla seemed grateful, though always a little distant. My parents gushed about how beautiful the day would be. Daniel even thanked me once or twice, though in that half-hearted way of his, like it was just expected, but underneath it all I felt it. The distance. The way they talked around me rather than to me. The way they made plans without my input, even though I was paying for them. I ignored it, clinging to hope. I told myself that on the wedding day, when I was there in the crowd, when they introduced me to guests as the bride's sister-in-law and the groom's beloved sister, it would all feel worth it. But that text shattered every illusion I had left. It wasn't just rejection. It was a declaration. You are not one of us. You don't belong here. You never did. And as painful as it was, there was something freeing about it too. Because once you realize you'll never be accepted, you stop begging for acceptance. I stared at that text for hours, my heart broken, but my mind sharpening like glass. And slowly, the pain turned to something else. Something hotter, sharper, more alive. Revenge. But here's the thing. My revenge wasn't born from hatred. It wasn't about destruction for the sake of it. No, my revenge was about balance. About reclaiming the years I had been invisible. The money I had poured into black holes. The dignity I had buried just to keep the peace. They thought they could take, and then discard me. But what they didn't realize was that in their greed, they had left every thread of their precious wedding in my hands, and I was done being their foundation. I was ready to watch everything crumble. That night, I pulled out every receipt, every contract, every email confirmation I had. I spread them across my table, each one a reminder of just how much I had given, the venue booked in my name, the catering deposit under my card, the flowers agreement signed with my signature, the band contacted by me, payment pending, the honeymoon suite, my credit card holding the reservation, piece by piece. Their perfect wedding was nothing but scaffolding built on my back. And I had the power to pull it all down with a single phone call. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about a wedding. This was about every slight, every dismissal, every time they told me Daniel was more important. This was about finally being seen, even if it was in the ruins of their perfect day. I didn't sleep much that night. My mind was buzzing, my heart pounding. But for the first time in years, I felt alive. Not small, not invisible, alive. And as dawn broke, painting the sky in streaks of pink and gold, I whispered to myself, they wanted me gone. Now they'll see what life is without me. I didn't rush. That was the first rule I gave myself. Revenge wasn't about rage, it was about precision. If I stormed in too early, they would have time to fix things, time to scramble and salvage their perfect day. But if I waited, if I timed it right, I could ensure the cracks appeared when it mattered most, when everyone was watching. As I became silent, I didn't respond to my mother's text. I didn't reach out to Daniel or Layla. I didn't post anything online that might give them reason to worry. Instead, I let them think I had accepted their decision, that I had retreated into the shadows, too wounded or too weak to fight back. But behind the scenes, I was pulling every thread that held their dream together. The first call I made was to the venue, a sprawling estate just outside the city, with rose gardens and crystal chandeliers. They had raved about it for weeks, bragging to relatives that Daniel's wedding would be the event of the year. I still remembered the woman's cheerful voice when I had signed the contract months ago. And that same voice was calm and professional when I called her again. "Good morning," I said, keeping my tone even. "This is regarding the Anderson Lewis wedding booking. My name is on the contract." "Yes, of course," she replied. "How can we help you today?" "I'd like to cancel." There was a pause. "Oh, are you sure? The wedding is only 2 weeks away." "Yes," I said simply. "Circumstances have changed. Please send me the cancellation paperwork." And just like that, the crown jewel of their wedding was gone. I pictured my mother's face when she received the call, the way her voice would tremble with disbelief. For once, she would realize that I wasn't just a background figure. I was the foundation, and without me, everything collapsed. Next came the caterer, a luxury service that specialized in multi-course meals and wine pairings. The deposit had been hefty, but since it was under my name, the contract was mine to end. I called them the very next day. "I'm afraid we'll need to cancel the Anderson Lewis event," I said. The manager hesitated. "That's unusual, especially on short notice." "Are you sure?" "Positive." The sigh on the other end of the line told me everything I needed to know. Another domino had fallen. I imagined Daniel's fury when he realized his menu tasting, his endless demands for nothing less than perfection, had been for nothing. I smiled to myself. I didn't stop there. The florist, the photographer, the band, all of them were tied to me. All of them could be undone with a phone call. Each time, I kept my voice calm, detached, polite. Never angry, never emotional. That was the power of it. I wasn't a scorned woman throwing a tantrum. I was a businesswoman making decisions. By the end of the week, their carefully constructed wedding was unraveling thread by thread, and they had no idea. But I wasn't done. No, this wasn't just about stripping away their luxuries. It was about timing. I wanted the collapse to be visible, undeniable, humiliating. As I set things up so that the news would reach them in waves, each hit harder than the last, the venue cancellation. They'd hear about that immediately. The caterer pulling out. A few days later, the florist, the band, the photographer, one by one, like dominoes toppling in slow motion. And when the dust settled, when they scrambled to piece it together, I had one final card to play. The honeymoon. Daniel had bragged endlessly about their honeymoon suite, a 5-star resort by the ocean, with private balconies and champagne on arrival. He had told anyone who would listen that it was the perfect start to their marriage. But what he didn't know was that the reservation was mine. My credit card. My name. My control. I held that card close, saving it for the perfect moment. Because nothing would sting quite like watching your dream getaway vanish into thin air. As I set each piece in motion, I felt something strange inside me. It wasn't guilt, not anymore. I had spent too many years drowning in guilt for things that weren't my fault. No. What I felt was power. For the first time, I wasn't the background character in my family's story. I wasn't the scapegoat or the silent provider. I was the one holding the strings, and they were the puppets who didn't even know they were dancing on my stage. It was intoxicating. Still, I didn't let it consume me completely. Revenge without reflection is hollow. And at night, when the quiet pressed in, I thought about everything that had led me here. I thought about the little girl who blew out candles on a cake that wasn't hers. I thought about the young woman whose job offer was ignored at the dinner table. I thought about every time I was told Daniel mattered more, and I whispered to that younger version of myself, "You were always enough." They just couldn't see it. But now they will. The silence from my family during those weeks was almost eerie. My mother didn't call. My father didn't check in. Daniel didn't bother to reach out himself. But I knew the storm was brewing. I knew the calls would come, the frantic messages, the accusations, and when they did, I'd be ready, because this time, I wasn't the one left outside the door. This time, I was the one holding the key. The first crack appeared exactly as I predicted. It was a Tuesday evening when my phone buzzed. My mother's number flashed on the screen. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hello," I said, my voice calm. Her tone was sharp, almost panicked. "What have you done?" I tilted my head, even though she couldn't see me. "Excuse me." "The venue," she snapped. "They called to say the booking was cancelled." "Cancelled? Do you have any idea what this means?" I let a beat of silence stretch before answering. "Yes. It means there's no wedding at that estate." Her breath hissed through the line. "How could you? After everything?" I cut her off. "After everything I paid for, you mean? After everything you took, and then told me I wasn't welcome?" There was silence. For once, she had no quick retort, no sharp dismissal. I said quietly. "You told me I wasn't invited. So why should I keep paying for something I'm not even allowed to attend?" The silence deepened, heavy and awkward. And then, in the smallest voice I had ever heard from her, she said, "We'll figure something out," and she hung up. I stared at the phone, a smile tugging at my lips. The first crack had appeared, but it was only the beginning. I knew the caterer's cancellation would hit next. Then the florist. Then the band. Each call would land like a blow, each loss cutting deeper into their pride. And I would be here, calm and steady, watching their perfect picture crumble. It wasn't just revenge. It was justice. For every year I had been invisible, they were finally being forced to see me, not as the daughter they ignored, not as the sister they used, but as the storm they never saw coming. The funny thing about silence is how loud it becomes when people are desperate. After my mother's frantic call about the venue, the quiet that followed wasn't peaceful, it was charged, buzzing like the air before a thunderstorm. I knew it wouldn't last, and I was right. 2 days later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't my mother. It was Daniel. I stared at his name on the screen, my chest tightening. For years, I had craved his approval, his attention. He was the son I was told to orbit around, the one whose shadow I lived in. And now, here he was, calling, not out of love but necessity. I let it ring until the very last second before answering. "Hello." His voice was sharp, laced with anger. "What the hell did you do?" I leaned back in my chair, keeping my tone steady. "You'll need to be more specific." "The caterer cancelled," he spat. "They said the contract holder pulled out." "That's you, isn't it? Do you realize how much trouble this has caused?" I closed my eyes, letting the satisfaction wash over me. "Yes, I realize. Just as I realized when you told MOM to uninvite me after I paid for it all." He hesitated for a fraction of a second, then scoffed. "This isn't about you. It's my wedding. You had no right, no right." I cut in, my voice sharper now. "No right? After I paid for the venue, the food, the flowers, the band? No right? After you erased me from the guest list like I was nothing?" "You're right, Daniel. I had no right. But I had control. And you forgot that." There was a silence, and for the first time in my life, I heard uncertainty in his voice. "You're ruining everything," he muttered. "No," I said quietly. I'm just reminding you that nothing you have was ever really yours. And then I hung up. It was like watching dominoes fall in slow motion. The next day, the florist called my mother. The arrangements, thousands of roses, lilies, and orchids were no longer available. My mother called me 3 times in a row. I didn't answer. That evening, the band pulled out. The lead singer, a man with a honey-smooth voice, emailed me directly to confirm the cancellation. I forwarded the email to Daniel without a word. By then, I could practically picture the chaos in their house. My mother pacing, wringing her hands. My father silent, avoiding confrontation as always. Daniel raging, cursing, throwing tantrums. And Lila, the bride, caught in the middle of a storm she never saw coming. I almost pitied her. Almost, but then I remembered the way she looked at me when they first got engaged. Like I was an outsider. Like I wasn't family. Like she knew I wouldn't be part of her picture-perfect life with Daniel. No. She was complicit. She had benefited from my silence, my money, my sacrifices. And now she would taste the emptiness. 2. The begging started soon after. My mother was the first. She called late at night, her voice trembling. "Sweetheart," she said, the word sounding foreign on her tongue. "We need to talk." I said nothing. "You've made your point. We should never have sent that message. But please think of your brother. Think of the family. Everyone is expecting this wedding." I laughed. A low, bitter laugh that startled even me. "Now you want me to think of the family? Where was that when you told me I wasn't invited?" "That was a mistake," she whispered. "We thought it would be easier for who?" I snapped. "For you. For Danielle. Easier to erase me than to admit I was the one paying for all of it." She fell silent, and I realized she didn't have an answer. "You always told me family comes first," I said. "But what you really meant was Daniel comes first. And I come last. Please," she whispered. "Don't do this." I hung up without another word. The next day it was my father. He almost never called me so rarely, in fact, that when his name flashed on my screen, I had to check twice to be sure. His voice was weary, the way it always was when life forced him into responsibility. "Listen," he began, "your mother is upset. Daniel is upset. But maybe there's a way we can fix this. If you'd just reinstate the contracts." I cut him off. "No," he paused. "Don't be difficult. You know how important this is." "No," I repeated, firmer this time. "You're making a scene," he said, his voice growing cold. "People will talk. Let them," I said. "For once, let people talk about the daughter you ignored instead of the son you worshipped." He tried again, but I hung up, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. But the most surprising call came later that week. It was Lila. Her voice was softer than I remembered, almost pleading. "I don't know what happened between you and Daniel, but this wedding means everything to me." I said nothing. "I know it's unfair," she continued. "I know you feel excluded. And maybe you should have been invited." "Maybe they were wrong to maybe," I repeated, my voice sharp. "You stood there and let them erase me. You never once said I deserved to be there. And now you want to talk about fairness." She hesitated. I didn't think it was my place." "Your place?" I scoffed. "You're marrying into this family. If it's not your place to speak up about right and wrong, then whose is it?" Silence. "You had a choice, Layla," I said finally. "You could have stood up for me. But you didn't. And now you'll marry Danielle in whatever shabby excuse for a wedding you can piece together without me." Her voice cracked. Please, don't do this to us. But I had already made up my mind. Goodbye, Lila, and I hung up. The closer the wedding came, the more frantic their calls became. Each day brought a new disaster: cancelled vendors, no replacements available on such short notice, spiraling costs as they tried to patch the holes with last-minute bookings, and I stayed silent, watching, waiting, letting them drown in the emptiness they had carved out for me. For once, they were the desperate ones. For once, they were the ones begging. And for once, I was the one with the power to say no. But as satisfying as it was, I knew it wasn't enough. Not yet, because the final blow hadn't fallen. The piece that would cut deepest, that would leave them not just scrambling but broken, was still in my hands. The honeymoon, that perfect escape they had boasted about for months. The dream Daniel had bragged about to every friend, every co-worker, every relative who would listen. The proof of his charmed life, his golden boy status. All of it rested on my credit card, my name, my choice, and I wasn't about to let them enjoy a single sip of champagne by the ocean after what they had done. No, if they thought the wedding was chaos, they had no idea what was coming next. There's something poetic about saving the sharpest blade for last. The venue, the food, the flowers, the band, they were all pieces of the puzzle, important but replaceable. My family could scramble, throw money they didn't have at the problem, beg vendors into pity, and still manage to patch together some semblance of a wedding. But the honeymoon? That wasn't just a trip. That was the dream. The proof Daniel loved to dangle in front of everyone, as if marrying Lila wasn't enough. A private villa on a Greek island. 5-star chefs. A personal concierge. Sunsets dripping gold across turquoise waters. I remembered the way he'd smirked while describing it at a family dinner, how he'd gone into detail about the infinity pool, the champagne waiting in the suite, the way Lila's eyes had sparkled, while my mother sighed with approval, and I remembered sitting there quietly, invisible, while they planned it all with my money. So yes, the honeymoon was the blade, and I sharpened it carefully. 2 weeks before the wedding, I made the call. "Good afternoon," the travel coordinator said, her voice polished and professional. "Hi," I replied sweetly, giving my name. "I need to cancel a booking." "Full cancellation?" "Yes, the villa in Santorini." Her voice faltered slightly. That's quite a large reservation, ma'am." "Are you certain?" "Yes," I said, steady as stone. "I'm certain." And just like that, the dream dissolved. I didn't have to wait long for the fallout. That evening, my phone exploded with notifications, texts, missed calls, voicemails, piling up one after another. The first was from my mother. "What did you do? The honeymoon is gone. Do you have any idea what this looks like?" The next was from Daniel. "Are you insane? You ruined everything. Everything. Do you know what people are going to say?" And then, "Lila, please don't do this." This was supposed to be our start. I didn't reply to a single one. Instead, I poured myself a glass of wine, sat on my balcony, and watched the sunset, the same sunset they thought they'd be enjoying in Greece. But the real twist came the following morning, because word had spread. It started small gossip, trickling through mutual friends, whispers among extended family. Someone leaked that the perfect wedding Daniel and Lila had been bragging about was falling apart, that vendors were pulling out, that the honeymoon villa had mysteriously vanished. And then came the questions. Why, how, what really happened? By the end of the week, the whispers had turned into full-on rumors. And the story that began to circulate wasn't flattering. Some said Daniel had failed to pay for anything. Others said the bride's family had backed out of funding. A few speculated that the golden boy had finally overreached, proving he wasn't as perfect as his parents always claimed. And the best part? I didn't have to say a word. The silence told the story for me. Of course, my family didn't take it quietly. My mother called again, this time furious. "You've embarrassed us. Everyone is talking. Do you understand? Your cousins are asking questions. Your aunts are whispering. Do you want this family humiliated?" I let her rant, and when she paused to breathe, I answered simply, "You humiliated me first," she gasped. "This isn't the same." "It's exactly the same," I replied. "You erased me from the wedding I paid for. Now I've erased the wedding from you," she sputtered, furious, but I hung up before she could respond. Daniel was less composed. He showed up at my apartment. I heard the pounding on my door before I saw him. His voice carried through the walls, sharp and livid. "Open the door. I know you're in there. We need to talk." For a moment, I considered ignoring him. But something in me wanted to see his face, wanted to watch him unravel. As I opened the door, he stood there, jaw clenched, eyes blazing. The golden boy stripped bare. "You've destroyed me," he hissed. "Do you realize that? Everyone's laughing. They think I couldn't afford my own wedding, my own honeymoon. Do you have any idea how that makes me look?" I folded my arms, calm in the storm. "Maybe now you know how I felt when you sent me that text." His face reddened. "That was different." "No," I said softly. "It was the same. You cared about appearances, about control, about what people would think if I was there. And now the whole world knows you're nothing without me." He stepped closer, his anger radiating. "You think this makes you strong? You think ruining me makes you better?" I held his gaze. "No, but it makes me free." For the first time in my life, he had no response. He just stood there, shaking, his mouth opening and closing without words, and then he left. The days that followed were a blur of chaos, messages flying, family members taking sides, whispers becoming louder than ever. Some relatives reached out to me, quietly admitting they admired what I'd done. Others scolded me, accusing me of cruelty, but none of them truly understood. This wasn't just about a wedding. It was about years of being the shadow, years of being silenced, ignored, erased, years of being told my brother mattered more. Canceling the honeymoon wasn't just revenge, it was justice. The wedding, when it finally came, was a pale imitation of what it was supposed to be. Gone was the grand ballroom. Gone were the lavish flowers, the gourmet food, the prestigious band. Instead, it was a modest gathering cobbled together at the last minute, a venue far smaller, a caterer who clearly filled the spot reluctantly, a DJ instead of a live band, and hanging over it all was the unspoken truth everyone knew. It was supposed to be more. It was supposed to be dazzling. And it wasn't. I wasn't there, of course. But I heard the whispers after. How people noticed the absence of the luxury they had been promised. How relatives wondered aloud why the golden boy hadn't delivered. The irony? I didn't need to ruin the wedding myself. I just had to let them ruin their own image. But here's the thing about power. Once you taste it, it's hard to let go. As I sat alone on the night of the wedding, sipping wine, scrolling through photos people had posted, I realized something. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning, because my family hadn't just uninvited me from a wedding. They had uninvited me from my own bloodline. They had declared, in one cruel text, that I didn't belong. And if that was the game they wanted to play, I was ready. Because now, I wasn't just the forgotten daughter. I was the storm they never saw coming. There's a funny thing about families like mine. They build their whole lives on appearances. Reputation is currency. Control is power. Money is the glue that keeps the fard from cracking. And once you pull one golden thread, the whole fabric starts to unravel. The honeymoon was just that. First thread. After the wedding, the whispers didn't fade, they grew. Daniel and Lila left for a hastily booked trip to a resort stateside instead of Greece. But even that became a spectacle. Pictures posted online weren't of turquoise seas and sun-drenched villas, they were of crowded pools, cheap cocktails, and a honeymoon that looked more like a college spring break trip. I should felt satisfied. I should closed the book, poured my last glass of wine, and let it end there. But I couldn't, because every time I replayed that text, "You're not invited. Your brother doesn't want you there," I remembered how small they made me feel. How disposable, and suddenly destroying one wedding didn't feel like enough. I started with the finances. Most of the wedding expenses had gone through my accounts. The deposits, the transfers, the invoices, they all carried my name. Which meant, when I cancelled, I didn't just void the services. I exposed the truth. The Golden Boy's perfect wedding was built on my wallet. I made sure word got out. A quiet conversation here, a strategically leaked receipt there. Soon, people weren't just whispering about a cancelled honeymoon. They were whispering that Daniel hadn't even paid for his own wedding, that his sister had footed the bill and been cast aside like an unwanted guest. Suddenly, it wasn't just gossip. It was scandal. The inheritance was next. My parents always believed they could control the future by dangling it over our heads. Who would inherit the villa, the businesses, the family trust? It was their favorite weapon. Behave, and you'll be rewarded. Disobey, and you'll be cut off. But what they didn't realize was that I had already secured my future years ago. Quietly, patiently, I'd invested in myself, my career, my savings, my independence. I didn't need their money, and so I used that freedom to my advantage. At a family gathering I wasn't invited to, I made my presence known anyway. Not physically, but through a carefully crafted email sent to every relative on the family list. The subject line was simple: the truth about the wedding. Inside, I laid it all out. How I'd been asked to pay, how I'd been erased, how I cancelled everything when they erased me. Not with venom, not with insults, just facts. Cold, sharp, undeniable facts. By the time dessert was served, my words were already being read aloud around the table, and just like that, the illusion of the perfect family fractured. My phone buzzed nonstop that night. Some relatives sent quiet messages of support. You did the right thing. We always saw how they treated you. Others accused me of cruelty. Family is family, no matter what. Why make it public? But none of their opinions mattered. What mattered was that the control my parents had clung to for years was slipping through their fingers. Because once people start questioning one lie, they start questioning all of them. Daniel's rage, however, was the most entertaining part. He showed up at my office this time, dressed in his tailored suit, trying to project authority. But authority doesn't work when everyone knows your wedding was funded by your sister. You're pathetic, he hissed, leaning across my desk. You think this makes you powerful. You're just bitter, jealous. I smiled calmly, refusing to flinch. I'm not jealous, Daniel. I'm done. And that makes me dangerous, he sneered. You'll regret this. No, I said softly. You will. And as he stormed out, slamming the door, I realized something. For the first time in my life, Daniel wasn't the one with the final word. But my revenge wasn't about a final word. It was about a final strike, because the biggest weapon hadn't even been touched yet. The family business.it was my father's pride. A company he'd built from nothing, a legacy he always said would belong to Daniel. The business was woven into our family's identity, a symbol of everything they valued: money, reputation, legacy. But like everything else in our family, the business had cracks, and I knew exactly where to find them. So while Daniel licked his wounds and my parents scrambled to save face, I began preparing the next move. I wasn't just going to ruin a wedding. I was going to dismantle the empire that made them believe they could erase me, and I was going to do it piece by piece. The family business wasn't just a company. It was our altar, our temple, our unspoken God. My father built it from scratch in his 20s, sweat, lies, charm, and more than a few backroom deals. By the time I was a teenager, the company was already a symbol of respect in our community. My parents would walk into restaurants and people would stand. They'd get invited to galas, fundraisers, charity events, not because anyone liked them, but because everyone wanted proximity to their power. Daniel was always groomed to inherit it. I wasn't. When I asked questions about operations, finances, or strategy, my father would laugh and say, "That's not for you, sweetheart. Your brother will handle it." When I showed interest in taking on projects or clients, my mother would pat my hand and say, "Don't trouble yourself with these things. Your place is elsewhere, elsewhere." That was their favorite word. But what they never realized was that I'd been paying attention all along. I knew how deals were structured. I knew where corners were cut. I knew who was loyal to my father and who secretly resented the empire he ran with an iron fist. And now, those details weren't just knowledge. They were weapons. I started quietly. Late nights, I combed through old records I'd saved over the years. Contracts, emails, notes from conversations I wasn't supposed to hear. I pieced together a web of questionable practices. Tax loopholes exploited too aggressively, partnerships inked without proper disclosures, employees pushed out under suspicious performance issues. Individually, they were small cracks. Together, they painted a picture of a company far less stable than my father wanted the world to believe. And then, I found the perfect opening. A supplier's small firm in another state had been underpaid for years. Buried in the fine print of their contract was a clause my father's lawyers had used to squeeze them dry. I reached out, not as a family member, but as a concerned party with evidence. They were hesitant at first, but when I sent over the documents, the silence that followed spoke volumes. Within a week, they were preparing a lawsuit. The first domino had tipped. Daniel didn't notice at first. He was too busy sulking, licking his wounds from the wedding disaster, trying to prove he was still the golden son. My father reassured him constantly, "The business will be yours. Don't worry about your sister's tantrums." But then came the first headline. Family company faces lawsuit over supplier dispute. It wasn't front page news, but it was loud enough to echo in the industry. Competitors took notice. Partners grew uneasy. Employees whispered in hallways. And I smiled. The second move came faster. Through contacts I'd made in my own career, I quietly funneled information to a journalist who'd been sniffing around the company for years. I didn't hand everything over. I wasn't reckless. I gave just enough to stir curiosity, just enough to raise suspicion. Soon, a full expose was underway. By the time Daniel realized what was happening, it was too late. Our next family gathering was chaos. My father's face was red with fury, my mother pale and trembling, Daniel pacing like a caged animal. "You did this." Daniel spat at me across the room, his voice trembling with rage. "You're trying to destroy us." I held his gaze, unflinching. "No, Daniel. You destroyed yourselves. I'm just making sure the world sees it." My father slammed his fist on the table. "You're no longer my daughter." And for the first time, those words didn't pierce me. They freed me. Because in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't trying to belong anymore. I wasn't desperate for their approval. I was dismantling their throne brick by brick. But I wasn't done. The lawsuit and the expos were cracks. Visible, yes, but survivable if they managed damage control. My family was nothing if not skilled at covering their sins. If I wanted to finish this, I had to strike where it would truly hurt, and that meant going after what they valued more than reputation, more than legacy. Money. I'd saved this part for last, for years. My parents had funneled money through offshore accounts, hidden investments, and shell companies. It was their insurance policy, their untouchable vault. The kind of wealth that guaranteed Daniel could fail 100 times and still live like a king. But while they kept me out of the spotlight, they forgot something crucial. Invisibility has its advantages. I built my career in finance, in data, in systems. I knew how to follow paper trails most people couldn't even see. And little by little, I found their vault. Not all of it, God knows how much they'd hidden over decades. But enough. Enough to cripple their untouchable status. Enough to freeze accounts, flag suspicious transfers, and force them into audits they couldn't spin. The night I filed the anonymous report, I didn't celebrate with champagne or gloating. I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the city skyline, and let the silence wash over me. This wasn't just revenge anymore. This was reclamation of my voice, of my worth, of every piece of me they tried to erase. Within weeks, the storm hit. Bank accounts frozen. Investigations launched. Partners pulling out of deals. Lawsuits stacking like dominoes. And in the middle of it all, Daniel the heir, the golden boy, the shining star, looked less like a prince and more like a drowning man. I watched from a distance. Calm, steady, unflinching. They had wanted me invisible. Now, I was unforgettable. The funny thing about empires isn't how they're built, it's how they fall. When the headlines hit, when the lawsuits piled high, when banks and regulators started breathing down their necks, I thought they'd rally together, circle the wagons, defend their legacy. But I was wrong. Instead, they turned on each other. It began with whispers. Daniel cornering my mother late at night, accusing her of being too careless with the offshore accounts. My father shouting at Daniel in board meetings, calling him incompetent, too spoiled to handle the crisis. My mother sobbing, clutching her pearls, insisting none of this was her fault. At first, I only caught wind of it through contacts still inside the company. Employees talked. Secretaries leaked. People who once bowed to them now relished in watching them unravel. And oh, how they unraveled. Daniel tried to step up, to play the hero. He went on TV interviews, tried to reassure investors, flashed that plastic smile my parents had groomed since childhood. But the confidence cracked quickly. Reporters asked questions he couldn't answer. Lawsuits escalated. And every time he stumbled, the world saw it. My father, furious, humiliated, lashed out. He stripped Daniel of responsibilities, reassigned loyal staff, cut him out of key decisions. It should have been a private family matter. But the leaks kept coming. Board members whispered. Journalists wrote. Soon, it wasn't just the company on trial, it was our name. And I knew exactly who was feeding those leaks. Me. But I didn't expect what came next. One evening, I got a message from someone I never thought would reach out. It was my aunt, my mother's sister, the one who had always stood on the sidelines, watching the drama unfold without ever picking a side. Her message was short. They're falling apart faster than you think. Call me. Curious, I did. She told me everything. How Daniel had accused my father of hiding money from him, of siphoning funds into accounts Daniel couldn't access. How my father had accused my mother of leaking information to rivals. How my mother, in turn, blamed Daniel, claiming his arrogance made them vulnerable. They weren't a united front anymore. They were three predators in a cage, clawing at each other for survival. And for the first time, I realized something. I didn't have to keep pushing. If I stood back long enough, they would tear themselves apart without me lifting a finger. But here's the twist. The more they fought, the more desperate they became, and desperation makes people dangerous. One night, as I was leaving my office, I noticed a car trailing me. Black, tinted windows, the kind that blends into city streets until you start paying attention. I turned corners. It followed. I pulled into a gas station, parked under the brightest light, and stared at it through the rearview mirror. It didn't move. My heart pounded, but I refused to show fear. I filled my tank slowly, deliberately, then drove off. The car peeled away in the opposite direction. But I knew. This wasn't paranoia, this was a warning. I didn't report it. Didn't tell anyone. Because deep down, I already knew where it came from. My family. The people who once held me in their arms as a child. The ones who sang lullabies, kissed scraped knees, celebrated birthdays. Now, they were considering whether silencing me would fix their problems. But here's what they underestimated. I wasn't that little girl begging for their approval anymore. I was the storm. And if they wanted war, I was ready to burn everything they had left. The collapse was accelerating. Suppliers pulled out. Loyal clients walked away. Government audits tightened. And all the while, their money bled frozen, tied up, lost in the maze I'd helped expose. Daniel drank more. My mother's health declined. My father, the once unshakable patriarch, grew thin and paranoid, barking orders no one wanted to follow. They had once locked me out of a wedding, sneered at me like I was nothing. Now, they couldn't lock me out of their downfall, because it was happening from the inside, and I was watching every second of it. The night it all came to a head, the city felt unusually quiet. I wasn't planning on seeing them. I thought I could finish this chapter from a distance, letting the papers, the courts, and the public do the work. But sometimes fate, or maybe karma, has other plans. It was my aunt who called me again. Her voice was urgent, shaking. They're not just fighting anymore, she whispered. They're desperate. Your father, he's called an emergency family meeting. They want you there. For a moment, I laughed. The audacity of it. After years of exile, after all the texts, the cruelty, the deliberate erasure of me from their lives. Now they wanted me in the room. But then she said something that made my blood run cold. They think you're behind this. And they're right. I could've ignored it. Could've stayed home, safe behind locked doors and lawyers. But something inside me stirred a mix of defiance and closure. If they wanted a confrontation, then I'd give them one. Not as their discarded daughter, But as the woman who had dismantled their empire, the villa was quieter than I remembered. No parties spilling out onto the lawn. No golden lights glimmering across champagne glasses. Just shadows. Just echoes. I stepped inside, heels clicking against marble floors that once gleamed like pride itself. And there they were. My father, pacing like a caged lion, veins bulging at his temples. My mother, seated rigidly, clutching a glass of wine. With trembling hands. Daniel, slouched in a chair, eyes glassy, face pale, half drunk, half defeated. They turned when they saw me, and for a brief moment, silence, like they were staring at a ghost. You, my father spat, breaking the stillness. You did this. I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. Yes, I said simply. Daniel groaned, head in his hands. Do you have any idea what you've done to us? To me. I tilted my head. Do you have any idea what you did to me? My mother's lip quivered. We're still your family. No, I cut her off sharply. Family doesn't lock you out. Family doesn't humiliate you, use you, bleed you dry, then throw you away when you're no longer convenient. My father slammed his fist on the table. We built this name, this empire, and you've dragged it through the dirt like some bitter correction, I said, leaning forward. You dragged it through the dirt. I just pulled back the curtains so the world could see. For the first time, I saw something flicker in his eyes, fear, not of me, but of the truth. Daniel stood suddenly, his voice breaking. Why couldn't you just let it go? Why couldn't you leave us alone? I turned to him slowly. Because you didn't leave me alone. You made sure I'd never forget how unwanted I was. You texted me the words, "You're not invited." Do you remember that, Daniel? Because I do. Every single word. He froze. His face paled further. He remembered. My mother whispered, almost inaudible, we just wanted to protect him. He was always the favorite. Her words trailed off, but I caught them, and in that moment, it all clicked. Every slight, every cruel choice. Every time I was pushed aside. It wasn't about me being unworthy. It was about me never being allowed to compete with him. They had built their empire around Daniel, the golden child. And I was just a shadow they tried to erase. I felt lighter, because now I knew. And knowing meant their power over me was gone forever. You wanted me small, I said, voice steady. You wanted me silent. But I grew louder, bigger, stronger than you ever imagined. And now, the empire you sacrificed me for, it's gone. Because of you. Not me. You. My father looked like he wanted to scream. My mother buried her face in her hands. Daniel just sat there, broken. I turned to leave. But before I stepped out, I said one last thing. I didn't come here to save you. I came here to watch you drown. And then I walked away. As the heavy doors closed behind me, I realized something profound. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their acceptance. I didn't even need revenge anymore, because the greatest revenge had already happened. They had destroyed themselves, and I had finally let them go. The first morning after the confrontation, I woke up early. No alarms. No buzzing phones filled with frantic messages from my family. No whispers of judgment, just silence, and for the first time in years it felt peaceful. I poured myself coffee, sat by the window, and watched the city wake up. Cars moving like veins through concrete. People rushing to lives that didn't belong to me, and yet, for the first time, I realized something important. I owned my own life. The news of my family's collapse spread quickly. Headlines hinted at scandal, financial instability, lawsuits, and broken relationships. But I didn't read them. I didn't need to. The truth was already embedded in every whispered conversation, every raised eyebrow, every cautious glance from former colleagues or family friends. I had won. Not with anger. Not with yelling. Not with destruction for the sake of destruction. I had won by existing. By refusing to be invisible. By reclaiming the voice they tried to steal. In the weeks that followed, I took control of my own destiny. I restructured my career, expanded my investments, launched projects I had only dreamed of when I was trapped in their shadow. I traveled to places I had longed to see, not for appearances or social media validation, but for myself. Every step was deliberate. Every choice reminded me that I no longer owed anyone an explanation, a presence, or their approval. And then came a message I never expected. It was from Lila. At first, I thought about ignoring it. After all, she had stood by, silent, when my family tried to erase me. But the message was short. I see now. I don't understand everything, but I see you. I wish I could have. I read it twice. Then I deleted it, not out of anger, but because I didn't need her validation. She could watch from the sidelines, just as my family had. The difference: I wasn't waiting for permission to exist. Months passed. Daniel tried to salvage what was left of his reputation and the business. But the damage was irreversible. My father and mother retreated into silence. Their empire crumbled. Their golden boy unmasked, and me. I flourished. I moved into a new apartment, one I had bought with my own money long ago, when I was still the quiet daughter in the corner. I decorated it for myself, not anyone else. I filled it with art, books, and light. I learned to enjoy my own company, to trust my instincts, and to savor the quiet victories that no one else saw. One evening, as I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine, I reflected on everything that had happened: the wedding, the cancelled honeymoon, the financial sabotage, the family confrontation. It had all led here, and I realized something profound. Revenge isn't about hatred. It isn't about making people suffer. It's about reclaiming what's yours: your voice, your dignity, your freedom. I smiled, thinking back to that fateful text. You're not invited. Your brother doesn't want you there. At the time, it had hurt me more than I could have imagined. But now, it was the spark that ignited my own life. The moment they told me I didn't belong, I finally realized I could create a life where I belonged, not with them, not in their world, but in my own. And that, I decided, was the sweetest victory of all. Weeks turned into months, and the dust from the empire's collapse didn't settle, it hardened. I watched from a distance, quietly tracking the headlines, listening to whispers through mutual contacts, and occasionally seeing posts on social media. My family's life was unraveling in ways even I hadn't anticipated. Daniel's public image was in shreds. Once the golden boy of the family, the young heir with perfect charm and poise, he now appeared clumsy and incompetent to everyone outside the household. Deals fell through because no one trusted him to manage even minor projects. Investors walked away. Competitors circled like vultures, sensing weakness, and I had to admit it was almost satisfying, not cruelly, but as a witness to the natural consequences of their own arrogance. My father, the patriarch, had retreated into shadows. His once booming company had shrunk. Staff deserted him. Old partners avoided calls. Public statements were met with skepticism and derision. The man who once commanded respect now, answered questions with vague reassurances and empty promises. It was painfully clear that no amount of pride or stubbornness could save him. My mother's health suffered. The stress, the shame, the endless attempts to patch the chaos, they weighed on her physically and emotionally. She had spent a lifetime cultivating appearances and authority, and now she had nothing tangible to hold onto. She had overlooked me, silenced me, and erased me, and now she was alone with the consequences. And then there was the quiet part that I loved the most. The cracks between them, where once they were a family united by greed and image, now they bickered constantly. Arguments about money, loyalty, and blame echoed in empty boardrooms and vacant dining rooms. Daniel accused my parents of hiding assets. My father blamed Daniel for the failures. My mother's pleas for calm went unheard. I didn't intervene. I didn't need to. The house they had built on control and favoritism was collapsing under its own weight. Meanwhile, my life continued peaceful, independent, and fulfilling. I traveled freely. I invested wisely. I surrounded myself with people who valued me, not for my family's name, but for who I was. Every choice I made, every project I launched, every decision I celebrated, reminded me that the life I had always wanted was now mine. And sometimes, late at night, I would think back to that first cruel text, "You're not invited. Your brother doesn't want you there." I remembered the sting, the humiliation, the sense of invisibility, and I smiled. Because I had built this, not inherited it, not borrowed it, not demanded it. I had earned it. That night, as the chandeliers sparkled above and champagne flowed freely, I toasted silently. To freedom, to independence, to the life I had always deserved. And in that moment, I understood. Revenge had been the spark, but empowerment was the fire, and that fire would never burn out. The world doesn't stop moving just because you've rewritten your own story. Months after rebuilding my life, I found myself reflecting not with anger, not with resentment, but with clarity. The past wasn't gone, but it no longer held power over me. And sometimes, life has a way of serving poetic justice without anyone lifting a finger. Daniel reached out first. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even a plea. Just a message. I don't understand how you did it. Everything is gone. We are gone. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Words couldn't undo years of lessons I had learned, and they couldn't undo the power I had reclaimed. Sometimes, silence says more than any speech ever could. My parents tried next. They sent letters, emails, even a few hesitant phone calls. All carefully worded, apologetic, calculated to test if I would respond. And I realized, closure wasn't about hearing them say sorry. It wasn't about granting them forgiveness. Closure was about me. My peace, my freedom. I watched quietly as my family tried to rebuild the remnants of what they had lost. They were forced to confront the consequences of a lifetime of favoritism, greed, and arrogance. Some learned, painfully, to be humble. Others didn't, stubbornly clinging to illusions of power that no longer existed. And I let them. Because I didn't need to intervene anymore. I found solace in my own life. Friends who had always supported me became closer than family ever had. Opportunities I had only dreamed of became reality. I traveled, worked, created, and loved on my own terms. Every achievement was mine. Every success, a testament to the strength I had forged in the fire of betrayal. And yet, life has a subtle way of reminding you of the lessons learned. One afternoon, I received an unexpected call from a former business rival. They had heard about my journey, my victories, and the way I had rebuilt from nothing. "You've done what no one expected," they said. "You've turned betrayal into triumph. We want you on our team. We want to build something together." I laughed softly, the kind of laugh that comes from confidence, experience, and understanding your own worth. "Let's talk," I said. The poetic justice wasn't in seeing them suffer. It was in knowing that I had taken everything that was meant to hold me back and turned it into fuel for my life. The wedding they excluded me from, the honeymoon they denied me, the empire they hoarded for their golden son, it had all been a spark. And I had built a life blazing with independence, success, and freedom. As I stood on my balcony that evening, the city lights shimmering below, I thought of the first text again. "You're not invited. Your brother doesn't want you there." And I smiled, because for the first time, I realized something truly liberating. I didn't need an invitation to belong. I didn't need approval to succeed. I didn't need their love to live fully. I had everything I needed already. And with that, I raised my glass, silently toasting to the girl they tried to erase, and the woman I had become. Years passed. Time, the great healer, had worked its magic not to erase the past, but to transform it. I walked through life differently now. Not cautiously, not defensively, but fully, boldly, and unapologetically. The girl who had been told she didn't belong at her own family's wedding had grown into a woman who belonged everywhere she chose. The villa, the empire, the wealth my family had hoarded, they were stories now, echoes of a life I had outgrown. Daniel, I heard he managed to stabilize some small portion of the business, but nothing like before. The golden boy image had faded, replaced with whispered warnings and quiet envy from those who knew the full story. My father and mother, they lived more quietly, humbled, perhaps broken, but still clinging to fragments of pride. And while part of me felt no joy in their downfall, I felt no need to intervene. Justice had already been served. I had built a new life on my own terms. My consulting firm thrived, gaining recognition not because of a family name, but because of my vision, strategy, and relentless perseverance. My clients trusted me because I delivered results, and I trusted myself because I had learned the hard way that strength isn't given, it's earned. And the personal victories were even sweeter. I traveled, explored, and discovered passions I had long suppressed. I built friendships that were real, deep, and supportive. And in moments of quiet reflection, I realized the greatest gift of all, freedom from the need to be anyone's shadow. Occasionally, I thought back to that first cruel text, "You're not invited. Your brother doesn't want you there." It used to sting. It used to echo in my chest like a locked door I could never open. Now, it was a reminder of how far I had come, a spark that had ignited the life I deserved. Life isn't about revenge. It isn't about proving people wrong. It's about reclaiming yourself, step by step, until the life you live belongs solely to you. And I had done just that. The city lights shimmered below my balcony. The air was calm. The night was still. I raised my glass once more, a quiet toast to the journey, the lessons, and the woman I had become. No one could erase me anymore, and I would never allow it again, because I belonged to myself, to my dreams, and to the life I had fought so hard to claim. And in that belonging, I found something the family that tried to erase me would never understand: true power. Thanks for watching. Hoped you liked it. If you watched till the end, please comment revenge, so that we could understand you were with us till the end. As well as, please let us know, where are you watching from? What do you want to hear from us in next video? If you have any incident in your life, please let us know. We would love to share your story.